I've been thinking about making gooder words. So I recently had a week that was a jumbled swirl of hugs and laughter and tears and learning so many amazing things from hundreds of story-steeped souls who gathered at the Surrey International Writers Conference. Sunday afternoon, sitting in the restaurant bar with a bunch of fellow writers after the conference program had ended, and honestly pretending the conference wasn't really over, we sat around in a closely huddled group and did our best to keep the conversation going because we just didn't want to go back to the real world yet. And because we'd had less sleep and more people and more learning and less alone time and more ideas and less comfort zone than we usually do, our brains were on overload and our bodies were exhausted and we were all extra punchy. At one point, in answer to a question my tired brain has already filed away in the totally not recalling it today memory pile, my friend Bonnie said something about making gooder words. And we all laughed because writers who are so overtired and overpeopled that we describe a writing workshop as learning about making gooder words is both ironic and so true. Because when you think about it, isn't that really and truly what we're doing? There's a lot of wisdom wrapped up in that short phrase. Making gooder words. Even though my high school English teacher might have frowned and spell check is expressing its displeasure even now with a wiggly red underline, doesn't that phrase perfectly capture the spirit of what we want to say and what we were there to learn how to do? That the phrase is sticking with me even a few weeks later, I think is due in large part to the fun and surprise and the novelty of those words coming together in that particular way against a backdrop of such a focus on polishing and perfecting words. But ultimately, isn't our goal communication and connection with our readers? I don't recall ever expressing a desire to be a really correct writer, or a really accurate writer, or even, honestly, a really polished writer. If you had asked my 5-year-old self, or my 15-year-old self, or even my 45-year-old self what kind of writer I wanted to be, I'd have told you the same thing. I want to be a really good writer. But what does that mean to be a good writer? These days, we're being offered plenty of help on all fronts to make our writing better. But mostly what that means is really technically clean. We have AI telling us when we use a wrong word in a sentence and pointing out when it's misspelled or when a different type of punctuation should be used to make it technically correct, or even trying to complete our sentences for us with the most likely next phrase. But just because something is technically correct doesn't really mean it's doing the job you wanted it to do, does it? And what if you want to say something in a way that is different from what came before? I make up a lot of words, often combining them in random ways. I got away from this in most of what I share publicly of my writing, because maybe it seemed too silly or not grown up enough, or maybe I was just scared I'd get a ton of comments from people saying I clearly didn't know what I was doing or I needed a better editor. I'm not entirely sure. But I wholeheartedly believe that sometimes the technically incorrect way of saying something is better suited to actually communicate what we are trying to say in a way that people can actually hear and understand. And they might even appreciate the humanity of it. Because technical precision and perfection is something artificial intelligence is pretty good at. And we humans? Not quite as much. But we have other things going for us the robots don't have. We have hearts and souls and a deep well of emotional experience to call on. We have histories and relationships and dreams and hopes, and we can connect, really connect, with other human spirits inhabiting these bodies of ours. And as things get more and more, clean in our writing due to the integrated editing functions we have at our fingertips, whether we want them or not, honestly, it gets more and more important to own our humanity by the way we play with language and the stories we choose to tell. The expectation that we'll all be so rigidly consistent and polished and kind of sterile in our writing can take the focus away from our humanity, and it can really take the us out of our writing and communication. So, this week, I'm thinking about ways I can put more me back in not just my writing, but in all of my communication, and really back into my life as a whole. I'm thinking about how I can embrace those human imperfections and how I can lean into the silly, lighthearted, and humorous approach to sharing my ideas, big and little, because that makes them a little less scary, which makes me feel a little bit less scared and alone in turn. So, this week, are you up for trying an experiment with me? What if we just say what we mean with the words we have at hand, no matter how correct they may be? What if we do our messy, humanist best to connect with someone else across the void by putting our perfectly imperfect words and ideas out into the world? Where else might there be an opportunity to share our imperfect human self in our lives? And what are you not saying because you can't quite find the perfect words? This week, let's embrace the make gooder words approach to life. Let's try to embody the idea that the goodest words are the ones that are out there in the world connecting us to other people. The power of ideas comes from the sharing of them, not hoarding them all to ourselves. What idea are you ready to share with the world in your humanist goodest words this week? Thanks for listening to Go Think About with Crystal Hunt, the podcast where we keep it real, keep it human, and keep it honest. Before you take off, please remember to hit the follow or subscribe button in whatever app you're listening to the show. It'll help you stay on top of when new episodes are released, and it'll help me stay motivated to keep on creating, knowing that you are out there listening. Until next week, remember to be a kind human.